sorry.
Really quick, when I got the job, and this is going to really tell a negative story about me, I didn't know who the guy was. You know, I really did. I didn't know who the guy was.
Do you remember the legend, Clarence Williams III? He was once Lincoln Hayes, the black hero who broke through every barrier. He was once Mr. Sims, the eerie funeral home owner with that sinister smile that haunted audiences. But behind all that spotlight was a cruel truth. Before his passing in 2021, Clarence uttered a confession that left the world in silence. "I was never truly happy with the glory Hollywood gave me." A single sentence, like a cry suppressed for more than half a century, exposing the injustice he had carried. Though praised as a trailblazer, Clarence was still paid less than his white co-stars. Though standing at the peak of fame, he lived his entire life in the shadow of loneliness and isolation. Clarence Williams III was both an icon and a victim of the billion-dollar industry. He left quietly, with a heart full of wounds that could never heal. Harlem, New York, August 21, 1939. Clarence Williams III was born into a family with artistic roots. His grandfather was jazz musician Clarence Clay Williams, who once played in the notorious bars of New York. His parents worked hard to make ends meet, but life was never easy. From an early age, Clarence lived in two worlds. By day, he witnessed Harlem glowing with music, black artists bringing joy to the crowd. By night, he saw the bitter truth, those same artists driven out of restaurants and hotels simply because of the color of their skin. Clarence often recalled how he felt injustice as a child. Walking down the street, a 10-year-old black boy, he was called strange names. At school, he was a good student, but had few friends. "I always felt like a shadow," he once said. The only escape from that suffocating reality was books and theater. He would sneak into libraries reading Shakespeare even when he couldn't understand it all. He would often stand outside Broadway theaters watching the elegant audience step inside. In that boy's heart, a dream began to grow. "One day, I'll be on that stage too." At around 12, Clarence followed a friend to a small theater in Manhattan. He only meant to help clean chairs, but the atmosphere, the dusty scent of the stage, the overture of the orchestra, the lights pouring down, captivated him instantly. From that moment, Clarence knew his life's path would belong to the stage. Clarence's father wanted him to choose a steady career as a mechanic or postal worker. But his grandfather, an artist himself, encouraged Clarence to try the arts. That quiet support gave Clarence the courage to dream of the stage, even though the road was full of obstacles for a young black boy in the 1950s. After graduating high school in New York, Clarence Williams III joined the U.S. Army, not only to make a living, but also to prove to his father that he was strong enough to stand on his own. And when he returned, Clarence didn't choose the stable career his father had wished for. He chose the tougher road art. Broadway, the first explosion. Clarence stepped onto the Broadway stage in the 1960s. The play Slow Dance on the Killing Ground, 1964, lifted him into the ranks of top actors, earning him a Tony nomination, a rare achievement for a black actor at that time. His career seemed wide open, but the road was far from smooth. The biggest breakthrough came when Clarence was cast as Lincoln Hayes in the TV series The Mod Squad. At the very moment the civil rights movement was erupting, a black face in a leading role on national television was nothing short of a revolution. The show became a sensation. Every night, tens of millions of Americans glued their eyes to the screen following three rebellious youths who challenged the system. And at the center of that storm was Lincoln Hayes, with his voluminous afro eyes sharp as steel and a hardened presence that left audiences breathless. Clarence Williams III wasn't just playing a role, he became a living symbol for an entire generation hungry for freedom. After the Mod Squad, he became a pioneering black presence on television. But from there, Hollywood's ruthless game began. A game where Clarence, no matter how talented, was still just a pawn, and his skin color was the sentence already written. Hollywood and the color game. At his peak, Clarence earned about $10,000 per episode, a number that many actors of his time could only dream of. Adjusted for today, that's more than $80,000 per episode. But even as America hailed him as a hero, injustice lingered behind the curtain. His white co-stars were paid more. Hollywood praised him in public, but quietly kept Clarence on the lower tier. And Clarence came to realize a painful truth. Even as a star, even as the first black icon of American television, he was still just a pawn in a game controlled by others. The roles that vanished, lost to white actors. After the roaring success of the 1970s, Clarence longed to break into big-screen cinema. He auditioned for many roles from action to drama. But every time the name Clarence Williams III made it to the final round, only to disappear from the official cast list. And the replacements. Not celebrated stars, but white actors with less experience, sometimes even visibly unpolished in front of the camera. In a 1999 interview, Clarence bitterly recalled, "They said, I had presence, I had talent, but then they told me the audience wasn't ready to see someone like me in a leading role. I asked myself then, when will the audience ever be ready? Maybe never." Those words carried both sorrow and fury. Clarence knew well he wasn't losing because of his acting. He was losing because of his skin color. Hollywood loved Clarence because he was different. The piercing eyes, the deep, gravelly voice, the mysterious aura. But that very difference became a chain that bound him. More than once, Clarence heard it straight from directors in the casting room. "You fit the darkness more than the light." It was one of the most painful things an actor could ever hear. It meant he would forever be locked into villains, dark figures, frightening shadows. And indeed, from Purple Rain to Tales from the Hood, Clarence was given only the dark roles. The abusive father, the terrifying crime boss, the sinister funeral home owner. He once admitted in a conversation with a colleague, "Hollywood loved my coldness, but they never allowed me to show my warmth. They never gave me the chance to be a true hero." Used as a symbol, but never treated as an equal, Hollywood needed Clarence. They needed a black face to prove the industry was diversifying. Clarence became the banner Hollywood raised whenever it was criticized. Purple Rain, 1984. Clarence played Prince's abusive father. A character both terrifying and tragic, reflecting the dark side of the American family. The film swept the box office with $70 million worldwide, becoming a cultural rock phenomenon. Sugar Hill, 1993, alongside Wesley Snipes. Clarence brought audiences back to Harlem's blood-soaked underworld. Clarence became the film's shadowy soul, a man who embodied the forces Harlem wished to forget, but could never deny. And then came Tales from the Hood, 1995, Mr. Sims, the role of destiny. A funeral homeowner with a sinister grin and a whispering voice that dragged audiences' souls into the underworld. The film cost only $3 million, but surprisingly grossed over $11 million, nearly 4 times its budget. From that moment, Clarence was no longer just Clarence. He officially became a symbol of social horror, the face of fear, the embodiment of America's darkest secrets. Even when he wasn't in the lead, Clarence left his mark on major series Miami Vice, Twin Peaks, Law & Order Empire. Just a few minutes on screen, a cold stare, a sharp line. Enough for audiences to remember him forever. Hollywood called it the Clarence Williams effect, small but haunting for a lifetime. Clarence never held an Oscar or an Emmy, but that didn't dim his presence. He was nominated for a Tony Award 1964, proof he was a true stage talent. He was honored as a trailblazer who broke racial barriers on American television. But behind the spotlight, Clarence was quietly diminished. In the Mod Squad, he was celebrated as an icon, but his paycheck was lower than his white co-stars. In films, he was cast only in dark supporting roles, never at the center of the light. In rooms where power and influence were decided, Clarence had no voice. Clarence knew he was being praised in public, but pushed down in silence. 2 worlds, 2 fates. Clarence's entire life was a bitter paradox. Out there, he was a legend, a trailblazer. The public looked at him with admiration, seeing him as a symbol of black pride. But inside, Clarence lived with the feeling of being trapped. He once said in a rare press interview, "Out there, I am an icon. But inside, I'm just a man locked in the darkness they created for me." That feeling followed Clarence throughout his career, a wound that fame could never heal. Looking back at Clarence's roles, the irony becomes clear. In the Mod Squad, he was a symbol of freedom, breaking barriers. But behind the scenes, he was seen as part of the show, not the soul of the show. In Tales from the Hood, he became Mr. Sims, the character who forced audiences to confront America's social darkness. Yet in real life, Clarence was also living in that same darkness, the darkness of injustice of a Hollywood that never truly treated him as an equal. That was the greatest tragedy. He played victims of society, while he himself was a victim of Hollywood. The warning he left behind. Many black actors of later generations, from Samuel L. Jackson to Denzel Washington, have mentioned Clarence as an inspiration. They know the path they walk today carries Clarence's footprints, along with the blood and tears he paid. Clarence was living proof of Hollywood's contradictions. It praised diversity, but preserved inequality. It raised him as an icon, but locked him into darkness. It called him a legend, but diminished him behind the curtain. A bitter legacy of a man who bravely walked through both light and shadow, only to show the world Hollywood was never fair to men like him. Clarence's career was a symphony of paradox. He had fame, money, unforgettable roles. But the higher he climbed, the more bound he felt. Hollywood only saw in him the haunting eyes, the mysterious aura, and turned that into a cage. Clarence longed for variety, but every time he tried to break free, he was pushed deeper into the dark. Clarence Williams III was tied to cold, haunting images on screen for his entire life. But behind those roles, his personal story was one few ever knew, and even fewer truly understood the loneliness he carried with him. Private life, the lonely man behind the lights, a brief marriage. In 1967, Clarence married actress Gloria Foster, later famous for her role as the Oracle in the Matrix series. They were seen as a powerhouse couple of black stage and film. Gloria was gentle, Clarence was mysterious. Together, they once made friends believe they were destined to complete each other. But the marriage lasted only until 1984. They parted quietly, without scandal, without public blame. Those close to him recalled that Clarence rarely spoke of the reason, only admitting simply, "We loved each other, but we belonged to two different worlds." Afterward, Clarence never remarried, nor did he go public with another relationship. When Gloria passed away in 2001, Clarence attended the funeral in silence, avoiding cameras. People said his eyes that day were so sorrowful, they made the entire room fall silent. No children. And a lifetime of silence. Clarence and Gloria had no children. After the divorce, Clarence never started another family, leaving no next generation behind. This only made his private life more hollow. He never said he regretted it, but deep down, he longed for a home. It was just something he never found again. While friends and colleagues built families and raised children, Clarence chose to live alone, almost cut off from the glamorous world. Was that his choice, or a fate he was forced to accept? Perhaps it was this very solitude that gave Clarence's eyes their depth on screen. When he became Mr. Sims with that half smile, audiences shivered because they saw something real. A darkness, a sadness, an emptiness that couldn't be faked. A hermit in Hollywood. It seemed Clarence was born to be tied to darkness. But what few knew, Clarence himself once admitted in a rare press interview, "It wasn't just acting, it was me." That statement was both a candid confession and a mirror reflecting his life. A life lived in silence, closed off, filled with secrets never revealed. While his peers often appeared at parties and events, Clarence chose to vanish behind the camera. He rarely showed up on red carpets, seldom gave interviews, and almost never spoke about his personal life. Close friends said Clarence rarely smiled. He lived simply quietly, often declining social invitations. One colleague once described him, "Clarence was like a hermit in Hollywood. He walked onto a set, did his work brilliantly, and disappeared the moment the lights went out." That silence created a veil of mystery around Clarence. Audiences only knew him through his roles, but few ever saw the real man behind them. It made Clarence both unique and profoundly lonely. No scandals, but no joy either. Unlike many Hollywood stars, Clarence was almost untouched by scandal. No public romances, no addictions, no lawsuits. From one angle, he seemed like a clean artist, but this spotless image didn't come from perfection. It came from his decision to withdraw from the spotlight of private life. Clarence built a wall around himself, and that wall also kept joy away from him. Colleagues often recalled that Clarence would leave the set early, rarely staying behind to chat or laugh with others. He devoted himself entirely to his roles, but outside of that, he hardly connected. The roles refused, and the rumors that spread within the industry. There were long-standing rumors that Clarence had turned down many major opportunities. Some roles in high-profile projects reportedly came his way, but Clarence shook his head. The reason, according to those who repeated the story, was that he didn't want to become Hollywood's black token. Though there was little official proof, the rumor reflected one truth: Clarence was always wary of how Hollywood used black actors. He wanted to control his image, even if that meant losing opportunities. One critic once wrote Clarence could have become a much bigger star. But he chose his own path, less dazzling, but filled with pride. His silence and his choice to stand apart from the glitter gradually turned Clarence into an outsider in the very industry he had devoted his life to. No networking, no parties, little contact with the press. It left him more and more forgotten by Hollywood. A colleague once admitted, Clarence was a great talent, but he never played the Hollywood game. And when you don't play that game, the system won't remember you. Loneliness. That was the key word running through Clarence's life. Even with fame, he lived like a shadow. And that loneliness seeped into every role, turning the dark characters he played on screen into raw reflections of himself. The haunting confession. In his final years, Clarence Williams III battled colon cancer. His body grew frail, his strength fading day by day. But what broke hearts even more than the illness was the last confession he left behind before closing his eyes. Words that silenced Hollywood. I was never truly happy with the glory Hollywood gave me. A short sentence, but like a knife twisting into the hearts of his fans. A man who had spent over half a century devoted to breaking barriers to becoming a symbol, ultimately admitting that all the glory had never brought him real happiness. For some, it was merely a deathbed lament. But for those who had followed Clarence's journey, those words were an indictment against Hollywood. His entire life he was praised in public, but quietly diminished. He was hailed as a pioneer, but never treated fairly. Hollywood gave him roles, fame, and money, but took away joy, freedom, and the chance to live as a complete artist. Clarence understood this. And when death approached, he no longer stayed silent. He admitted it all, as if freeing himself, and at the same time forcing the world to see the dark side of the spotlight. People mourn Clarence because he never received what he truly deserved. They grieve because after decades of giving, he still had to utter the saddest words of his life. And they are sorrowful because he left quietly. No wife, no children, no family by his side. Death and a funeral in silence. On June 4, 2021, Hollywood was shaken by the news that Clarence Williams III had passed away at the age of 81. His departure was not loud or flamboyant like that of some stars, but quiet, fitting the image Clarence had kept throughout his life, discreet, never seeking the spotlight. When he took his final breath, many in the industry suddenly realized a monument had slowly faded from Hollywood's lights. A modest funeral, a farewell in silence. Unlike the grand funerals often staged in show business, Clarence's service was held in a way that was small, yet profound, simple, but deeply moving. It took place at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York, where he was finally laid to rest. He was buried there beside his family, according to his wish for privacy and simplicity. Though the service was in New York, Clarence passed away in Los Angeles, which showed there had been careful arrangements made between the two coasts for his burial. Family and colleagues attended in a small circle. There wasn't a flood of press avoiding noise and spectacle to preserve respect for a man who had always chosen to live quietly. Reactions from the community, grief and gratitude. When news of his death spread, fans and colleagues everywhere sent their condolences. Many called Clarence a forgotten legend because though he had contributed so much, he was rarely honored properly while alive. On social media, images of Mr. Sims, with that haunting expression, were shared widely as a farewell tribute. That smile is no longer the sinister grin of a character, but the smile of a man who carried loneliness his entire life. Many comments said they had always noticed a trace of sadness in Clarence's eyes, and now they understood. It wasn't just acting. Some colleagues who had worked with him appeared at the funeral. Eyes red heads bowed before his casket. They didn't say much, but their presence alone was proof Clarence wasn't forgotten. And it was a farewell filled with emotion. Health and community. The message after death. Clarence Williams III passed away from colon cancer, a silent but especially deadly disease. The news not only shocked fans, but also sparked wide discussions about public health, especially within the Black community in America. The silent killer colon cancer has long been called the silent killer. Symptoms are often unclear, and many only discover it when the disease is already advanced. Clarence was among them. He rarely spoke about his health, lived privately, so even close colleagues had no idea he was fighting a deadly illness. When he died, Anscape published an article emphasizing that colon cancer is one of the leading causes of death in the Black community in America. According to medical statistics cited by Anscape, African Americans have a 20% higher rate of colon cancer compared to whites, a nearly 40% higher death rate from the disease. The reasons stem from many factors: fewer routine screenings, barriers in healthcare economic conditions, and the persistent inequities within the healthcare system. Clarence's death, therefore, was not just a personal tragedy, it became a painful example of medical inequality in America. A death that carried a message. Throughout his career, Clarence embodied characters that reflected social injustice, from the Mod Squad to Tales from the Hood. And tragically, even his death carried a powerful social message. Anscape wrote, "The death of Clarence Williams III not only leaves fans grieving, it is a reminder that the Black community must pay more attention to health, must break the silence around cancer screenings. Clarence is gone, but he leaves behind a message that lives on." In the wake of his passing, many articles urged African Americans to undergo colonoscopies earlier, instead of waiting until age 50 as traditionally recommended. Some health organizations even used Clarence's case to highlight the urgency of changing healthcare habits. Fans wrote on Twitter, "We lost Clarence Williams III too soon. Don't let silence take more lives. Get screened for Clarence and for yourself." Clarence Williams III lived his life in Hollywood's shadow, but in death he left behind a light for the community, a reminder to care for health and to never stay silent in the face of danger. Final wealth and community contributions. Clarence Williams III was never one of Hollywood's billion-dollar stars. He didn't live in a lavish mansion, didn't buy yachts or supercars. When he passed away in 2021, Clarence's net worth was estimated at around $2 million, a modest figure compared to many of his peers. But for a man who devoted his life to art rather than commerce, it was clear proof Clarence never chased riches. He only chose roles he believed were worthy. Who inherited his estate? Clarence left this world quietly, without a wife or children by his side. His only marriage, to actress Gloria Foster, had ended in 1984, and they had no children together. After the divorce, Clarence never remarried, nor did he make any public relationships known. This left many wondering who inherited his final estate. According to public records, Clarence left a will naming his relatives, siblings and nieces and nephews, as his heirs. Another portion he dedicated to arts organizations he had been connected with throughout his career, particularly those that supported young Black artists entering the craft. Clarence believed that art must continue to flow through the next generations, and this was his way of passing on the flame. Contributions to the community. Though he never flaunted it, Clarence quietly gave back to the community many times. In the 1960s, he taught as an artist-in-residence at Brandeis University, encouraging Black students to step onto the stage and raise their voices with confidence. Throughout his career, Clarence chose difficult, challenging roles, not to get rich, but to expose society's injustices. He once said, "If a role doesn't make the audience think, I'd rather not take it." Behind the scenes, Clarence often supported younger actors, offering advice and sharing the lessons he had learned in overcoming the same prejudices he had once faced himself. A legacy greater than money, measured in dollars. Clarence may not have been rich, but the legacy he left behind went far beyond numbers. He was a trailblazer for Black actors on American television. With his groundbreaking role in the Mod Squad, he left behind an iconic face of darkness in cinema. Characters that were grim, haunting, yet profoundly layered. He left behind a final confession, which became a wake-up call for Hollywood itself. The spotlight does not equal happiness. And he left behind a lesson for the community: health, fairness, and spiritual values matter more than anything else. When he passed, the world realized Clarence Williams III had given his entire life to art and to his community. His greatest treasure was never in a safe. It lived in the memory of audiences and in the inspiration he passed on to the generations of actors who followed.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.